Steve Vai,
Hello there, Cassius.
how are you today, sir?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for making some time to come back and speak with me today.
My pleasure.
Before we go any further, I just wanted to say, how are you? Obviously, we saw the post on your social media talking about the California fires. You mentioned that the fires made it just down the street from your home. So just wanted to check if there's any update and how you guys are over there.
Well, what I noticed in the very beginning was how fire reacts to intense wind. Because we had actual 90 mile an hour, 100 mile an hour gusts, and there's video, and you can see what that does to a fire. You know, it spread so quick that the people. Okay, so you've got the valley, which is where I live, and then you have the whole area with Hollywood, Beverly Hills, and the Pacific Palisades. And when that fire hit with the wind, it just consumed everything. But the wind was blowing in a particular direction, and as it was coming up over the hill, they desperately tried to stop it from getting over the hill because then you've got the whole valley, and we're right at the base of the hill. And
Yeah.
yeah, they really worked hard, and I watched it, and they did a burn back where they cut part of the forest and they push it back into the fire so that there's no path forward. And then they treated the whole ridge with various chemicals. So the fire didn't get over. And once the winds died down, it gave the firefighters an opportunity to get more containment. So right now it's pretty much dissipating. There's still danger, obviously, and we just got to keep an eye on the winds. But it was close.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm glad everybody's safe over there and that there's progress being made to remedying, obviously, all of this disastrous result. Just taking a look back at our last interview, the last time you were on the program was just about 3.5 years ago. And I have to tell you, Steve, I'm not sure if you've seen much of the reaction to our last interview online, but probably the most explosive reaction I've ever had to any guest who I've spoken to. And it's very curious to me because it's not necessarily music related. We got really deep last time talking about the ego, spirituality, and I kid you not, every single day, still to this day after 3 years, I get comments on that interview saying you changed people's lives, saying people really needed to hear what you had to say. My question is this something you could have ever anticipated, Steve? The fact that not only do you connect obviously with your music to all these people, but that you are able to inspire people and connect beyond the music in such a greater sense.
Well, I think every time we meet anybody or we read anything or we see anything, it has an effect on us. It may be very subtle, but you're never the same one moment from the next. So you hear things, and the world is always telling you things, people, events, and we absorb these things through our own understanding of our own reality. So I know when I look at myself through the years, my ego is tremendous. I've discovered this later when I was able to start to identify what that is inside. And so for many people, including myself, for many years, you just think you're right when you talk. Your position is very important to you. This is the ego, and it's because it fears being wrong, because its sense of security is based on being right, and it will fight to the death to be right. And this is what you see in the world. This is what war is. It's two egos fighting to be correct, you know, in
Exactly.
their beliefs. So this is a form of hell because what you're trying to do is assert your perspective in order to give yourself a firmer sense of security. You're saying, if you need to believe this so I can feel secure. So
Right.
this is a form of insanity because how's that working for you?
Doesn't seem
Doesn't
to be working well.
doesn't work in reality at all. Matter of fact, the opposite is true. So a lot of times I would find myself saying things because when I first started to venture into esoteric teachings and studies, uh, I believe, and I can only speak for myself, I went through a phase where you start connecting these dots. And at first, it was limited to my ability to understand. So I was reading all of these things of great value, but I didn't understand them. But when I was reading all these things of New Age or fascinating esoteric things, astral projection, pyramids, witchcraft, even Eastern philosophies, all these things, numerology, astrology, you start to believe that this stuff is really important and it holds the keys to reality. Yeah, it doesn't. But one, trying to find security within myself, I would adopt these beliefs and then just
Mm,
talk them. And I would see that through the years that the reaction that a lot of people have on that stuff is, I don't go for any of that crap.
hmm.
That would be sort of reaction. So my studies didn't end. I became more intense and I started to understand more and more some of the more lofty principles at the core of spirituality, the study. And I discovered that true the true study of spirituality is the study of the self, the laboratory of your own mind. And
Right.
that's when I started to discover um, a lot of fears. I mean, whenever you try to convince somebody of something that it goes against their perspectives or whatever, uh, and you're forceful with it, or there's a desperation in it. That's a form of fear. Because if you're confident in what you believe, that you don't mind what anybody else. It doesn't matter. You don't even need to say anything. So then I went through a period of real search and study, and this by studying people who are there, that I believe have found. Uh, I'll just say, for lack of a better term, the secrets of life.
Right. So to
You know,
speak.
so to speak. So you go through a period where you intellectually understand some of these principles. You're like, oh, there's no such thing as time. Well, that kind of makes sense because, and you start like connecting practical dots. And then it's not until you actually experience it as an experience, not just an intellectual understanding, that it becomes clear to you as practical reason. Okay,
Hmm.
spirituality is based in practical reason. So when I started to repeat to others these spiritual principles that I've learned that have their foundation in practical reason, you know it when you hear it, unless you're completely unconscious. And there are people that are just completely they just don't, they're not ready to hear. They're not ready to connect the dots. There's too thick of a layer of conditioned thinking and fear that has disabled them to have access to practical reason. And you can see it. Now that doesn't mean that they're hopeless. They're just as important or anything. That they'll everybody comes to the point where they eventually recognize practical reason, because otherwise causes dysfunction and suffering in your life. And that is the actual process involved with finally opening up to alternative reality, true reality, and recognizing things that just make sense. They transcend religion, politics, they transcend everything, and they just say, oh, yeah. So those are the things that I started to talk about. So it's not me. I'm not changing people's life.
Hmm.
I'm just telling them things that they actually already knew, but they didn't know they knew. Because
Wow.
that's what spiritual truth is. It's the recognition of something that's just so obvious to you that you always knew it, but no one ever you never realized you knew it.
Right.
So that's why people are writing to you, because they're seeing things. They're not my words. They're practical spiritual principles. They they were inspired in me by people who are there, that they embrace these principles. And as a result, I recognize the possibility of embracing them. And then miraculous things start happening. You start getting insights and experiential insights. And then they just show themselves to you in your life, in your external experience. You start recognizing them, and then you start employing them.
Hmm.
And then your life changes dramatically.
Wow. So it's really just about stripping away all of the big organized sort of whether it's explanations or studies or theories. It's basically just stripping everything down and going to what we inherently know and feel inside of us as human beings. That's what it
Yeah.
represents to you, essentially.
Yes, because everybody, like everybody that was ever born, is alive now, and ever will be born, knows the difference when they're making a decision, which you're doing all day long, on what feels good and what doesn't. All right.
That's it.
So you're going through these decisions all day long. What is that that's inside of you that says, okay, so let me put it to you like this. You'll only ever have two decisions to choose from, and you can only pick one in anything. When it comes time for you to make a choice, react, or recognize something. And what that is, one of them has its foundation in fear, and you feel it because it feels like it feels like anger. It feels like impatience, frustration. All of these things that we feel that are negative emotions are the creation. They're created by making decisions that have their foundation in fear. Anger
Right.
is just another voice of fear. You know, I mean, you hear things like mm, uh, uh, systemic racism. You know, racism isn't systemic. Fear is systemic. Racism is an attribute of fear. It doesn't afflict everybody, but fear does, you
Hmm.
know? So it's an attribute, and there's many attributes. You could be afraid of rich people. There's all sorts of fear. So these are mental decisions that we make, but there is an option every single time to make the other decision that we can make on any subject has its foundation in friendliness, in healing, in love, in understanding, in humor, in appreciation. The, Everybody knows this tipping point, and you are the only one that can make that decision. Isn't that interesting? That's your only freedom, as a matter of fact. Your only freedom in your existence here
Is that
is
choice?
is that choice of what cheek you're gonna, you know, it, you are you gonna turn. Now, here's the interesting thing. In the moment of every decision, if you decide, I want peace over in this situation, I want win-win, I want to heal, I want friendliness. That's your decision, right?
Hmm.
Is it anybody else's ever?
No,
Has it ever been for anybody that was ever born?
no.
Has
Contrary to what
that
some people might think.
Yes, no, it hasn't. So has that ability ever not been there in you? So you were born with it, right? It's
Absolutely.
now we have the choice of listening to it, turning to it, or
Right.
not. and our fear leads us to believe that we can't turn to that, you know. So what happens is you're you already have everything you need. You don't need a book. You don't need anybody else. You don't need, you don't need anything outside of you. It was built into you by universal design. You're not separate from that voice, right? It's closer to you than your hands and feet. It's closer to you than your heartbeat, than your body, right? When you make a decision, it's not in your body, it's in your mind.
It's even deeper. Yeah.
It's deeper. And that, where is that? How
Hmm.
did it get, what is it? You are not separate from uh, your ability to make a improved choice. It'll be there if you, and here's the miracle. All you have to do is have the intention of turning to it. And that's all you need to do. Matter of fact, you can't do anything. You can't figure out the situation. Here's a situation. I'm gonna take the fearful road and condemn, attack, uh, criticize, uh, whatever. Okay, so anything in that direction, and it will create a dysfunctional situation, and it gets worse. But you also have the choice of saying, "I prefer uh, solutions." So what you're doing in essence, one may say, is you're turning to your better self, your higher self, your practical reason. You're turning to your, and then certain terminologies may say things like you're turning to your guidance. You're turning to your higher guidance, and some may say you're turning to your Christ consciousness.
Hmm.
You're turning to your Buddha consciousness. Whatever it is. Some people call it God. Some people call it Jesus. Does it matter? Does it matter what you call it? Not
No.
one bit, because everybody has it. As a matter of fact, the display of religious uh, uh, fighting, fighting over religion, is fear. It's the choice has been fear.
Right.
So you start to recognize that, and a real miracle happens in a person's life when they understand that they do have this higher guidance in them. They're not separate from it. How could you be separate from it?
Exactly.
Yeah, you're separate from your hands, and you're separate from your body. You're separate from everything in the world, but you're not separate from that. Isn't that interesting?
I think that's the wildest part about the whole
Yeah,
thing
you
is that
don't
it's
need
inherently inside
anything
you.
else. You have it. How would the creator of the universe not do that? How fair would that be? You know what I mean? You're
Well, it's
not
like
here
when they
alone.
say exactly. It's like when they
You're
say it
not
doesn't
left
matter
in
where
the
you go.
wilderness alone. You are not left in this wilderness alone. You have everything already, but it takes you to turn to it. So the miracle is that it's interesting to understand that turning that cheek is our greatest fear,
Hmm.
because
Wow.
we believe that taking the healing route, taking the friendly route, the loving route, is a sign of weakness. The ego tells you that's a sign of weakness. If you do that, you're going to be taken advantage of. You're going to lose. You're going to be less than. You're going to be behind. You have to get ahead. You have to win. And there's nothing else that will do. That's what the ego tells you. So it actually says, what do you think you can gain by not fighting?
Hmm.
You know, it doesn't. Our greatest fear is turning to that, because I know it sounds bizarre, but our greatest fear is the love of God, because that's what that is. And until we start to trust it, we'll never know that the fear is an illusion, and that everything you actually want joy in life, that's what you want. I'm not saying you turn this way and all the cars and the houses and the money and all the fame all's going to come flowing in. That's not what I'm referring to, although that could happen, you know. But what happens is you get peace of mind. You get peace of mind. And what is that worth, really? Come on, what is that worth compared to anything else? Do you know how many billionaires I know that have no peace of mind?
Yeah, it's worth everything.
It is everything. It's of the greatest value. The other stuff is fine. It has value. It's of relative value. And it's only an expression of your internal. So, um, what I started to do, and I'm not an accomplished spiritualist, you know, I'm a
You
work in
don't think
pro.
so?
No, I'm a work in progress. And because I can see layer after layer within myself, as you peel these egoic layers off, you see how deep they run and how
Mm.
unconscious we are of them. So, but it's an interesting journey because there is a foolproof solution to everything. And it's basically turning that way and becoming present, just present in the moment. You know, your only our only security, real security, is in the present moment where your life actually is. You know, so I don't know, Cassius. I think you pull this stuff out of me.
I love this. No, this is great. I'm just listening over here. I mean, Steve, what do you consume on a day-to-day basis in terms of content and along with that, how do you keep yourself in this mindset and this evolving journey in a world with so much noise and so many distractions? You know, I'm reminded of your lyric, I don't care about crooked politicians. I don't want to see someone bleeding while I'm eating. I mean,
Yeah.
do you avoid news? Do you avoid social media?
Well, for my whole life, up until the pandemic, I avoided news. I just never watched it. Every time I turn it on, I thought it was a joke. I thought that why, if you have this platform, all you're going to talk about is these miserable things that are happening. Fear. It's all fear. And I recognize that. And when it came to politics, well, you know, in school, I was terrible at history. You know, I failed constantly. I have no interest in even when I look into the past. I'm not very good at chronological things. You know, like this happened then and that happened then,
Right.
and especially history was just like insane to me because all that we know about history is what we read, and all that we read is who wrote it, CNN or Fox. You know, I
Or
mean,
the winners
because
of the battle.
yeah, that was going on back then too. So for me, all bets are off on trying to find any uh, reality. And plus, politics takes up this much of your life unless you give it your attention. And you know, the one thing about politics that I can say is, in reality, they have no power over you unless you give it your power. And giving politics your power, uh, it can be seen if you, or anything in general, if you find yourself attacking somebody else. And when I say attack, I mean your thoughts. If do you find yourself criticizing, attacking, demeaning another person based on their political affiliation? Are you creating an identity for them in your own mind? Because if you are, you've given your power away.
Mm.
You just give your power away to politics. Uh,
Exactly.
so taking your power back is the recognition that everybody has a perspective, and it's fine. For the you know for the most part, we all want the same thing. We just have different ideas of how to get it. And
Exactly.
yeah, and so I never really could pay much attention to it. But during the pandemic, like many citizens, I just wanted to know what's going on. What do I do? Do I wear a mask? You know, what's going on? So I started looking at the White House briefings. It was Fauci and Trump and Dr. Burke. And remember, you're talking about a guy that didn't know the difference between CNN and Fox, between Democrats and Republicans, between what the House is, how it works, nothing. Congress, nothing, nothing. All big mystery to me. Uh, uh, Ignorantly bliss.
Right.
And it was great. But then I started looking because I was watching, trying to figure out what to do, and I would see Trump speak, and then I would go to other news stations, and I'd see like they would take something he said or Fauci or something, and I said, no, 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 they made a mistake. That's not what that's not what he was saying. Now, not that support I support any politician that has good intentions, whatever that is. And I don't know. I'm not a political person, really. But so then I started to become fascinated with the press because the news is different than like the kind of press I do. Everything I do is like creative, fun, guitar loving, kind of people. And politics is something very different. So I started watching the news that reported on politics, and it really dawned on me that uh, people are in great fear, and they have lost touch. Not they, but this ideology of politics just kind of lost touch on what I learned to believe government should be doing. you
Yes.
know, really, really outlandish. So, but the important thing is, have you taken your power back from it? Of course, it's not pleasant when you have to pay taxes and do all this kind of thing, but how much does it steal your sense of well-being? Or let me put it another way. How much do you allow it to steal your
Allow
sense
it.
of well-being? Because you're the only one that's allowing it.
Wow. No, for sure. I think that's very meaningful for people as well. Just keeping the humanity and staying focused on your own circle is, especially in today's time, I think the most important thing that a person could do.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an individual kind of a choice, and it requires you to transcend the peanut gallery, meaning the outside world. In a sense, you have to forgive all that. You have to forgive other people's fears, but you can only do that when you recognize them in yourself and you forgive yourself for having them first. That's the
Right. It's the
that's the
ongoing
kicker.
process.
Yeah.
That's the
And
kicker, right?
yeah, that's the kicker. You have to recognize it in yourself first. And that's what they mean when they say you have to forgive yourself. Because I used to hear that and I'm like, what does that mean? Forgive myself for what? What I do? Like, but what you're doing is you're forgiving yourself your own illusions, your own, the meaning that you've given things, the perspective you have on a subject or a past event. This happened to me when I was young, so that means I am this.
Exactly.
This is uh, uh, these are illusions in your own mind. It doesn't say, well, that didn't happen, but creating a story about it and then an identity that you carry through life that affects the quality of your whole life. That is a form of unconsciousness, but it has its place because eventually the suffering becomes so great, you start to yearn for your independence from it. And you already have that too. That's already there. There is a space in your mind that is unaffected by the insanity of the world. And
You have to
once you,
zero in on that.
yeah, but you have to recognize your own commentary, the own meaning that you've given, your meaning, the meaning that you have given things. It's important to know you gave them for yourself only, not for anybody else that was ever born or ever will be born or is alive. Your perspective on the world is based on all the unique experiences you've had through life that you've used to form your opinions, your beliefs, and the identity that you created for yourself and others. So this is something that we don't recognize we're doing. Yeah.
Do you
So
struggle with the fact, Steve, that, since you're talking about how you can't project onto other people, do you struggle with the fact that people idolize you? And how do you deal with that when you're trying to kill your ego? That must be a tough thing to balance.
well, I feel everybody's put in particular positions in life that are perfect for them in recognizing how their ego functions and how to address it. There's a lot to unpack there, but let me say this: the way that I've perceived fame or respect, through the years has changed. In the beginning, you believe that if you have it, if you have admiration, fame, success, all this stuff, you you have a more solid sense of security.
Mm.
You're more secure. I have proven that I am valuable, I am worthy, and yeah, but what happens if my next record doesn't? So there's no depending on things like that is very precarious. It's a slippery slope. It doesn't work. And so, but I didn't know that.
Hmm.
I just thought I want to be famous. It wasn't a burning desire, but I tell you what, something in me always knew that I'd be in a position uh, where I'd be able to make music and, there'd be people interested. I didn't know to what extent. It wasn't a big focus, but the real focus for me was something that I knew I could control because I knew I couldn't control the future. And what it was the enjoyment of playing the instrument, and finding new. This was like my real interest. It was like everything to me. It just was so great, so fun. I didn't mind. I didn't care what the rest were doing. But then it started. You reach an age where you have to go into the world and you have to balance your economics and you have to make ends meet and you got to figure out what you're doing. And I just never stopped doing that. But what came in the back door was the ego, and it started to kick in, especially um, during the '80s. When I look back at a lot of that, my interviews and stuff, they're it's a little pretentious. So there was a big ego, huge ego there. But what was the question again? Because I may have veered off.
If you struggled with the fact that people idolize you.
Uh, okay, so like in the beginning, when people would say, "I really like the way you play," or "I follow you," or "Wow, man, you really," I started playing guitar because of you. I never believed anybody. You know,
Really?
I just thought, "Oh, that's very nice. They're trying to be nice." Because I never thought I would ever be able to do something that would inspire, because I was always trying to be inspired. So I thought, well,
Right.
I'm not, there's nothing I'm doing. Well, maybe somebody will pick up something. And then once I started to, like when the Attitude song came out and then Crossroads and Dave Roth, uh, it was another level of recognition. And it was kind of nice for the ego because you're winning all the awards, you're making all this money, you're on the cover of all the magazines, the, uh, your peers are talking about you, and your music is selling like crazy, and so this is this for me at least. I can't say this is the case for everybody. I know people that this wasn't the case for, but it was for me. The ego came right in the back door, and you start getting, because in the beginning I'm like, they, I remember I had won best new talent in guitar player way back in the '80s, and I thought, how could that be? These people that the joke's on them.
Wow.
That's how I felt. And then I won this one year. I won all these awards, and one of them was for the most valuable player, and I was tied with Jimmy Page. And that's I got pissed off at that because I thought this whole thing is a sham. There is no way couldn't even imagine seeing my name in print next to him, more or less being revered as two of the greatest guitarists, most valuable players. I thought this is insane. So I kind of I didn't respect admiration. It was like don't fool me. Of course, I was nice.
Right.
Steve. Steve. You have no idea what you mean to me. That I everything you do on the guitar. And I would just be like in the back of my mind, yeah, 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 sure, sure. They don't. How could I? But I'd be very cordial and very nice. But then um, I started to realize that, well, the what I do is in a very small field in the music business, and there are lovers of that. And I know what it was like for me when I discovered the guitar, and I know how I felt about Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck and Brian May. They were everything, and my teacher, Satriani, like, is it even possible that somebody could feel that way about me? So I started, and I would talk to my wife about this. She says, "Sure. Why do you think they don't? They're telling you they do." I say, "Yeah, but I don't." Well, you not believing them is an insult to them, And I'm like, "Oh my God, maybe."
That's a whole new
So
perspective.
it's a whole new perspective, and this was a while ago. So now I understand uh, that when somebody comes to you, I know what it's like because I was that person. But how do I feel about that? Well, it's really a great honor to be part of a chain, but everybody is. Everybody is contributing. But it's really nice when I see these folks and they do they are very sincere, and I deeply respect that and appreciate that. Uh, I feel odd taking uh, like taking responsibility though.
Hmm. You
You know
still
what I
feel
mean?
like it's things that are bigger than you, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like I'm just playing, and if you want to be like me, find what it is in you that you love the most, and just be relentless with it. You will be. You won't to tell. You won't need me to tell you to be relentless. You just will be because you'll feel free to do what you love. And there's
That's
nothing
it.
that's your purpose, actually. Isn't that funny? That's your purpose to do what you love. Because then what you do, your love flows into it, and the world needs that. It needs your loving manifestations. And that might not be something that you think it should be, but there
Mm.
is something that you can do that you do that when you're doing it, you just feel free. There's no fear. There's no worry of failing or fitting in. If it doesn't work, you're just going to go that way and figure out a solution. Solutions are fun in that field. But
Yeah.
if there's a preconceived idea that your security is based on this, then you're going to freak out and you're going to have to the ego that it needs to be recognized, it needs to be appreciated, it needs to be better than. The ego isn't happy unless all of its competition is miserable.
It's very
And
true.
yeah, and that's actually a form of hell because the alternative is so great. The alternative is just freedom from any of that and loving what you do, appreciating it. So that's all I see myself doing, and I don't even do that all the time.
Right.
Sometimes I
It's
have to
still a work in
engage.
progress.
Yeah. So when people see that, what they're responding to, what you respond to in another person's activities, whether it's a musician, a great sports person. I mean, you know what it feels like to watch uh, a great sports athlete just effortlessly, you know. Caitlin Clark. I mean, I watched her, the basketball player, the female basketball player. It's just like an anomaly. It's
Amazing.
poetry to watch her. It just happens now and then. It's like watching Jacob Collier or something. They're just connected, and there's no excuses in it. And that's what everybody wants, and that's what's possible for everybody. It's not only possible, it's your natural state. But the ego says, no, you're excited about being a bricklayer, and
Mm.
you see the wall perfectly and you know how to do it and you enjoy putting every brick. But how important is that? What are you going to be, a bricklayer? Are you going to be a dog walker your whole life?
It's
You know
that
how
awful voice in the back of your
and
head.
it's not even your voice.
Yeah.
It's from the collective. You inherited it from a world in fear and guilt that is telling you the way you should be. This is a lie, and the sooner you discover it, the happier you'll be, because you'll feel good about doing those things that are interesting and natural to you. Now, does that mean that you can't improve on a skill that you're not good at that you'd like to learn? No, we do that all the time. You can learn other languages, you could play an instrument, you practice the instrument, and it might be more of a grind than if it was something that was just so natural to you. But us humans are interested in evolving our experiences and our tools and our gifts and our understanding. But there's always those things that we're just really good at.
Yeah. And
And
people
you
can
have to
feel that
respect,
pouring out.
yes, you have to respect them within yourself. So the forgiving of illusions is necessary when you recognize when you're if you want to get there. Because an illusion would be, well, I love doing this, but I have to do this to be accepted by the world. The world is telling me I should, my parents are telling me I shouldn't do that. But this feels so good. It feels good to me. I really want to just do this, but, you know, it's an illusion to believe that you have to do something that doesn't feel natural to you.
Yeah. That
So
you have to
that, and
be
that's what
pushed
one,
into that.
yeah. And it's an illusion to believe that somebody is making you do it. They're
Yeah.
not. They may be
It's you.
telling you to, but it's who's making the choice to do it or not. It'll only ever be you making that choice. So, being in touch with your creative instincts is important, but all too much they're obscured by the conditioning of the world that tells you you need to be different than what you
Mm.
actually are.
Boy, I'm going to be getting a lot of emails after this one. This is a good
Yeah.
one.
Don't buy
Uh,
into it. Don't buy into it.
we can't. No, this is valuable stuff. Two more quick points before we wrap up. Um, John Sykes, just wanted to bring him up. Obviously, a super tragic passing here in the world of rock and metal. You've spoken on Sykes in past interviews, talking about the fact that when you joined Whitesnake, you weren't going to sound like John Sykes, and you weren't going to try to sound like John Sykes. What are some of your memories of him, and just some thoughts in general you could share?
Well, he was such a phenomenal rock guitar player. I mean, when that Whitesnake record came out, we were all just stunned. He really captured that audio real estate with a guitar tone and a playing style that created like a fever, and his he really has a stamp in his musical DNA. And he delivered so much. He was really a great player and a great guitar orchestrator. And I didn't know him very well. Our kids went to school together.
Oh
You
wow,
know, right down, he lived right down the street, and our kids went to the same school. And his son would come over a lot. But actually, we have never really hooked up. We were always
interesting.
on tour or something. So he kept his illness very quiet. So I know I didn't know about it, and I don't know anybody that I know that knew him that knew about it. But Like I said, everything in this world is coming and going and coming and going. And if it doesn't go, that only means you went before it. But he really delivered. He came and he lifted the whole scene. He really did. You're a young man. In the 80s, when that Whitesnake record came out, it was a phenom. I
That's
mentioned
okay.
that, I wasn't going to try to sound like him. A better way of putting it is I can't.
Hmm.
I sound like me, which is very obvious when you compare the two Whitesnake records.
Right. No, for sure. You came in and you made your stamp on them just, in your own way. I wanted to ask you in regards to Frank Zappa, you've probably been asked every single question in the book about your time with him in that group. What is
Well, I'll
one
let you know if
aspect?
I haven't.
Yeah, there we go. Let's see if we can put it to the test. What is one aspect of Frank that you sort of find yourself thinking, geez, I wish people asked me about this part of Frank. I wish I got to talk about these aspects of my relationship with him or just him in general.
Well, uh, everybody knows what a taskmaster he was and how prolific he was and how funny he was and how smart and how present and how intuitive uh, and how bizarre in a sense. But one of the things that I noticed on a bunch of occasions was how much he loved his children and how they and his family. His family was very important. I mean, he had, you know, um, a long-lasting relationship with Gail, and he had four children. And what was interesting was when you were working with Frank, you were you were working, you're on. Every second is money, and and it's time that he needs to get things completed. But whenever we were in sessions and one of the kids came in, Frank stopped everything he was doing and became myopically focused on them without even the consideration that the band or people were recording. He gave them his full attention. They'd come, they'd sit on his lap for a little while, they'd play a little bit, he'd talk with them, and then finally, when they were ready, they'd get up and walk out, and we'd continue.
Wow. So it makes sense why his children today are so invested in his legacy and continuing to carry that torch, so to speak.
Well, I think Dweezil in particular he got the Frank bug. As,
Right.
remove him from being Frank's son. Dweezil is a fan, like me and like a lot of Frank fans. There's a deep reverence and enjoyment in the music and the science of it and the history of it. But Dweezil has the added advantage of Frank was his father, and so he really took it and respected and represented Frank's music in a beautiful way. So I think that a part of that is, just he was bit by the Frank bug.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
still talk with any of his family?
yeah. Amit just called me the other day when the fires were happening. He was so gracious and so supportive. He's like, "Look, get in your car and come over here right now." You know.
Wow.
And Dweezil, I'm in touch with Dweezil quite often, and we'll text or something. I haven't seen him in a while, but and I see Diva occasionally. I mean, I saw her not too long ago. I haven't seen Moon in a while.
I love that. Still all in the family. So obviously to end off the SATCHVAI Band, Surfing with the Hydra tour, you guys are going to be conquering Europe starting June 13th, and you just announced the lineup with Kenny Arnoff on drums, Marco Mendoza, and of course Pete Thorne. Super exciting project for the fans.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what people can expect when you guys get out on the road.
Like, I can't believe this band we got. I mean,
It's insane.
yeah, I mean, Kenny is just such a hitter, and what a great guy, to tour with, and just such a great hang, and such a pro, and always prepared, and the sound of his drums are just fat and wide. And Marco, I haven't played with him. I've never really worked with him, but I've been watching a lot of videos lately, and he's bringing something to the table that's very different than just the rock sensibilities. He has the ability to embrace more of Latin grooves, even. You know, there's a nice flow to what he does. And his bass, it sings. I don't know if you've ever heard him play like fretless or something, but it sounds like a voice, you know.
Yeah.
And Pete Thorne, I've admired him for quite a while. Here's a guy, you know, that he's like a soldier, you know. He's like a guitar soldier. He, you'd be surprised how hard it is to find big rock electric guitars playing rhythm in tune.
Hmm.
You know, isn't that? I can't. You know, I'm sure I'm in tune, but there's a way that some people hit the strings, they just explode and resonate beautifully, like Angus or even oddly enough, Kurt Cobain. They were different, but in when you add more gain, it's harder to make chords and playing sound really good. And Pete is just he's a master at it. I first started hearing him when he was demoing gear, and I'm like, wow, that's a great tone. Wow,
Nice.
this guy, he's got, you know, so I'm checking the boxes, you know, and his lead playing is beautiful. His intonation is great. He's just like a real soldier. And so it's going to be nice to have that underneath everything. I'm
Yeah.
really excited about the band and the tour, and it's the first time Joe and I have done something like this, and we're writing music together, and that's just so great because I'm not usually a collaborator. You know, when it
Right.
comes to my catalog and my solo work, I don't collaborate. My goal is to create a catalog of relatively undiluted music for better or for worse.
Right.
My playground, the end. But
So can
am
we expect an
very
album?
well, yes, but I am a very good collaborator when I know the project and I know the people and I know what's expected of me. So with Joe, it's just like heaven in a cup, you know, because he's just a great collaborator that way too. So we've been writing and writing and we're feverishly writing. And it's so much fun, you know, because we're bouncing ideas and it takes a certain trust and acceptance with another to collaborate on creative things, especially when those two guys come from a world of being the master and commander of their own ship.
Yeah, it's quite a meeting of the minds. So are you guys hoping, I would assume, to be playing new music on this tour?
Oh yeah,
Amazing. Awesome.
I'm very
Well,
looking very.
that's going to be very exciting for the fans. We encourage everybody to go and check out the tour. We will have the link down below for you guys to get your tickets. And Steve, thank you so much for making the time again. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and you're just the best, man. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll do it again in a couple more years. All right,
Let's do it, man. Maybe this time we'll next time we'll do it on the road.
you got it. Thank you, Cassius.
Awesome, man. Take
Bye
care,
bye.
Steve.